Let's go. What is the nature of ATP? Well, ATP is an acronym or an abbreviation for a complicated chemical called adenosine triphosphate. You can see A for adenosine, T for the tri, and P for the phosphate, ATP. The bad news is, though, you are expected to remember the word adenosine triphosphate because it is actually mentioned on the syllabus. Now, ATP is a complicated chemical. It is made up of other chemicals, one of which is adenine. Now, we'd have met adenine before. It is one of the 4 bases in DNA and in RNA. It contains nitrogen. Ribose is a sugar. We have met the sugar ribose in the structure of RNA as well. And it has 3 phosphates. We can understand the structure of ATP a little bit better if we look at the word structure. Here we can see adenine, or nitrogen-containing base, the sugar ribose. Now, the sugar ribose has 5 carbon atoms in it, for those of you who like detail. This is why the ribose sugar is given this symbol here, 5 carbon atoms, a pentose sugar. Now, the adenine and the ribose can be taken together, and when they are, the word adenosine can be used to describe them. ATP also has 3 phosphates. The phosphates are found here at the end and are bonded to one another. The bonds contain a lot of energy. Sometimes they're referred to as energy-rich bonds. Other times they can be called an unstable bond, whether or which they contain a lot of energy. You need to be able to draw this structure. Now, when a cell needs energy, what happens is the ATP will release the energy. And when it does, it is changed into ADP. And here is the phosphorus that is set free. It is now called adenosine diphosphate because it has 2 phosphate groups in its structure. So we start with our structure of ATP. As we mentioned already, we have energy-rich bonds here. When the cell needs energy, the ATP breaks up and sets free one of the phosphate groups, and the energy is released, which can be used in the cell. ATP now becomes ADP and a phosphate group. You can see it has only 2 phosphate groups, adenosine diphosphate. We have included the little abbreviation here, the letter I, because on occasion you might see that written down and it stands for inorganic phosphate. Now, when energy is given out in a cell, when energy is released as a result of chemical reactions, we have to have a way of storing it for future use. So it can be stored when ADP combines with a phosphate to form ATP again, and we are basically back where we started. So what is the role of ATP? Well, ATP is a chemical that stores energy in cells. It carries energy from where it is produced to where it is needed. So in a nutshell, according to the syllabus, ATP has a special role in the trapping and transferring of energy for cell activities. ADP and ATP are interconvertible. This idea of interconvertibility, being converted from one form to the other, is a very important concept that we have to make sure we master. ATP, as we have said, is a high energy, an energy-rich chemical or molecule. When energy is needed in a cell, it will break down and release the energy. Now, strictly speaking, in order for that to happen, water is required. But most times we can neglect this little point and ignore it. So basically, the ATP will break down into ADP and release its energy. This energy can then be used for activities in the cell. ADP, in reverse, can pick up energy if it is released in the cell, combine with a phosphate group and store the energy and be converted into ATP. So ATP is an energy-rich molecule. I like to think of ATP as being a van full of energy. When a cell needs energy, it will deliver the energy from place to place and drop it off wherever it is required. When it's carrying its 3 passengers, the 3 phosphates, 2 in the back seat, 1 in the front, it is full. It has energy. The crack is mighty. There is energy stored in the van. ATP is a store of energy for the cell. When ATP loses a phosphate, when it loses a passenger, the guy in the front gets out. It's like something is missing. The energy is lost too. The energy in the van is low. ADP, with only 2 phosphates, the 2 in the back, is a low energy molecule. It is now free to pick up energy and pick up a phosphate. So when energy is released in a cell, ADP, the empty van, will be there to pick it up, along with a phosphate, becoming ATP, an energy-rich molecule that stores energy for the cell. Remember, we said ATP has a special role in trapping and transferring energy for cell activities. What are NAD+ and NADP+? Well, NAD+ is an acronym or an abbreviation for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. Nicotinamide is the N, adenine for the A, dinucleotide for the D. And NADP+ is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. Now the bad news here is that you have to remember the proper names of these chemicals because they are actually mentioned in the syllabus and could appear on the exam paper. Now another notion to understand is that these are 2 complicated chemicals that are low in energy. Now, what is the role or the job of NAD+ or NADP+? Well, these 2 chemicals are able to accept 2 high-energy electrons, 2 high-energy particles that are negatively charged, and a hydrogen ion, a H+ or a proton. And when they break down, the reverse happens. They are able to release 2 electrons and a hydrogen ion. So in a nutshell, according to the syllabus, NAD+ and NADP+ have a special role in the trapping and transferring of electrons and hydrogen ions in cell activities. Let's have a closer look at this so that we can understand it a little bit more. NADP+ takes part in photosynthesis. Remember the P here. NADP+ can pick up 2 electrons and a proton or a H+, and it is converted into NADPH. NADP+ is a low energy molecule. NADPH is a high energy molecule. Now the reverse can happen as well. The NADPH can lose 2 electrons and lose a proton and will be converted into NADP+, which is what you had in the beginning. Again, this interconvertibility, where the two chemicals can be converted from one form to another, is vitally important to understand in photosynthesis. We have the same scenario in respiration. The NAD+, which takes part in respiration, is able to pick up 2 electrons and a proton and be converted into NADH, which is a high energy molecule. And the high energy molecule, NADH, can lose 2 electrons and a proton and be converted into NAD+. This sounds rather complicated. We're particularly interested in NADP+ because we're interested in learning about photosynthesis. NADP+ is a low energy molecule. I like to think of NADP+ as being a taxi, NADP's taxi service. It's involved in photosynthesis because of the letter P. NAD+ is a taxi service, NADP's first cousin, involved in respiration. NADP's taxi, NADP+, can pick up passengers. He can pick up 2 electrons and a proton. It then becomes NADPH, hired. NADP's taxi is hired. It has the H, which is the proton here, H for hired, and it has the 2 electrons. It will then deliver the 2 electrons and the H+ from place to place, dropping them off wherever they are needed. When it is carrying its 3 passengers, the 2 electrons and the H+, the 2 electrons in the back and the H+ in the front, it's full. It has energy. Again, the crack is mighty. There's energy in the taxi. NADPH is a high energy molecule. When NADPH, NADP's taxi hired, has the passengers, drops off its passengers wherever they are needed in the cell, like dropping a crowd off to the airport where they need to go. It's like something is missing too. The energy is lost as well. So when the 2 electrons and the H+ are dropped off, we now have NADP+. The taxi isn't hired anymore, no letter H on it. It's a low energy molecule. It's empty. It's now free to pick up more passengers, pick up 2 more electrons and a H+ and become hired, or NADPH again. Now, for those of you who like the detail, we have NADP+, which is a low energy molecule, picking up 2 electrons and a H+, becoming the high energy NADPH. It will be the same with NAD+, which takes part in respiration, that we're not really too interested in today. Now, taking this step by step, we can see how it works out. NADP+ has a positive charge. When it picks up 1 electron that has a negative charge, a positive and a negative cancel each other out, and we create a molecule called NADP, which is neutral. This neutral NADP picks up 1 electron, another one, the second one, which has a negative charge, and then it will become NADP- with a charge. That then will pick up the proton or the hydrogen ion that has a positive charge. The positive and the negative will cancel each other out, and hence we will create NADPH. From a chemical point of view, some of you might be interested in knowing that the addition of electrons to a molecule, that process, the addition of electrons, is called reduction. So therefore we can say that the NADP+, which you start out with, because it picks up electrons, is reduced tá NADPH. As an added detail, the addition of hydrogen is also called reduction in chemistry. Now, the same caper is to be observed when we want to talk about NAD+. We could go down through the same steps, but as I have said, we're more interested in learning about photosynthesis at the moment. More added detail. So in a nutshell, what is the role of NAD+ and NADP+? Well, in photosynthesis, we have NADPH with the 2 electrons and a proton. It will drop those electrons off and the proton off, and these will be used to form glucose, which we will accept as a fact at the moment. In respiration, NADH, no P, notice, will use its 2 electrons and the proton to form what we call ATP, which we will just accept at face value at the moment. So in a nutshell, as we've already said, NAD+ and NADP+ have a special role in the trapping and transferring of electrons and hydrogen ions in cell activities.